You're listening to The Voluntary Life, where you can hear ideas for finding freedom in an unfree world. Visit thevoluntarylife.com to connect with the show and hear all past episodes. Here's your host, Jake.
Hi, it's Jake here. Welcome to The Voluntary Life. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about 4 ideas that changed my life. I want to explain what the ideas are, why I think they're so powerful and important, and why I think they can have a huge impact on your life too. And I also want to tell you about the books that I got these ideas from to give you some recommended reading. If you want some recommendations for summer reading, you're going to get some good ones in this podcast. First of all, let me tell you a little bit about the background to this episode. It's been nearly 2 years since I started Patreon, and I've been thinking about what can I do to provide even more benefits to those people who are supporting me. And I'm excited to tell you about a new benefit that I'm adding this month. From now on, I will be doing a series of dedicated live streams once every month to life-changing ideas. The live streams will be based around books, where these ideas come from. And so there'll be books that you can read in advance of the live streams and then come and take part in a discussion about the ideas in the books. And so each month we'll tackle a different topic, and these will be the kinds of ideas that you hear about on The Voluntary Life. Ideas like financial independence and peaceful parenting, and all of the other topics that I think are really exciting life choices to consider. So it's going to be a course of life-changing ideas, and I'm arranging one of these live stream discussions per month. And if you take part, you'll get to talk about these mind-blowing ideas with me and other listeners. So you can think about the ideas, get your questions, get topics for discussion, and we're all going to talk about it together. So what kind of ideas are we going to talk about? Well, in this podcast, I'm going to share with you the topics of the first 4 life-changing ideas live streams that I'm going to do. And these will be the first that I'm going to do over the next 4 months. So I thought I would start with the ideas from 4 books that I can unhesitatingly recommend. So I'll tell you about each of these 4 life-changing ideas, and I'll tell you about the books that they come from. Now, these are just the first 4 that I'm going to tell you about today. There are many other ideas that are very important to me and that I think have had a really massive impact on my life, and especially on my level of freedom. So these are just the ones that I'm going to start with today, but there are many other ideas that I want to do, and I want to do some new ideas that I'm interested in reading about and discussing with listeners too. So if you're interested in taking part in these live streams, I'll provide more information at the end about how you can do so. The first idea that I want to share with you is the idea of principled negotiation. I got this idea from a book called Getting to Yes by Fisher and Ury, and it's a book written by a couple of lawyers about how negotiation works, what the dynamics of negotiation are, and what the principles are that underline it. The reason that this idea was so impactful for me is because this is how I really came to understand the process of win-win relationships versus win-lose. Principled negotiation is all about finding win-win outcomes. And this is relevant in business and entrepreneurship, but it's also relevant in every aspect of your life. It had a huge impact on me because I read this book a couple of years before the biggest business negotiation of my life, which was selling my business. And I found these principles incredibly helpful in that negotiation. But the idea of principled negotiation is now something that I see as much more fundamental to my overall philosophy of life and the way that I think about relationships, both in business and personal. Successful relationships are very much about finding ways to achieve win-win outcomes where both sides benefit. And that's something that is at the heart of all voluntary relationships in life. So I think this is a very powerful idea that can have a huge impact on your life, not just in helping you to achieve certain goals, like in my case, selling my business, but also just in helping you to have more positive relationships and to apply the idea of win-win relationships in practical terms in your own life. So that is the idea of principled negotiation. If you're interested in that idea, the book to read is Getting to Yes by Fisher and Ury. You can also read my book about negotiation, which includes a summary of principled negotiation, as well as a discussion of other topics important to negotiation. My book is Negotiate for Mutual Profit, and you can get hold of that book by becoming a patron or by joining my mailing list. You can get a copy of the PDF by joining my mailing list, which you'll find a link for in the show notes and on my website. If you would like to take part in the live stream discussion that I'm doing about the topic of principal negotiation, that's going to take place on the 23rd of June, and it's open to everyone who joins up at the Rockstar Entrepreneur tier of support, either on Patreon or on Bitbacker. I will put links in the show notes to more information about how to become a patron. But even if you don't take part in the live stream, I really recommend reading about principal negotiation. I think it is a life-changing idea. The second life-changing idea I want to tell you about in this episode is the idea of having a trusted system for productivity. This is something I've spoken about quite a lot on this podcast because I'm really interested in productivity. And what's so amazing about this idea of having a system is just the idea that you can have a system to handle all of the chaos of information that comes into your life. What I found amazing when I got interested in productivity was the understanding that life's challenges are highly repetitive. Even though it feels like you're facing a constant stream of new information, there is in fact a pattern in that chaos in terms of typical types of things that you have to deal with. A new email that shows up in your email inbox, something you have to remember, some task that you have to do or want to do. So the idea is that you can start to recognize these patterns of recurring challenges and then build a system for how are you going to deal with each of these challenges. What are you going to do when you have a new project? What actions do you take if you have a new goal in life that you want to achieve? What are you going to do about that? Where are you going to put that information and how are you going to act on it? What do you do when you get new emails in your inbox? How do you process them and go through them and so forth? And so the idea of having a trusted system is that you build all of these workflows for yourself that enable you to handle all that information coming into your life. And what's exciting about that is that this is a process of self-mastery. Productivity is ultimately exciting because you are getting to live the life that you want if you're able to get on with life and manage your commitments, the chaos that comes into your life, so that you can actually go after your goals rather than just being responsive, rather than firefighting. Once I understood that I could have a system for productivity, I became really passionate about it and I took on this challenge enthusiastically, and I spent a lot of time trying to build up my own approach to productivity and take on these ideas so that I can spend my time more effectively, get moving towards my own goals. And that's what's so exciting about this idea. If you can get into it, it really can change your life, getting a handle on your own productivity system, because it is a question of self-mastery. The approach that I find most useful for productivity is David Allen's Getting Things Done approach. And the book for that is a great one to start on is Getting Things Done. If you haven't read Getting Things Done, I really recommend it. And if you'd like to talk about building a trusted system for your productivity, you can take part in the live stream that I'll be doing with patrons on July the 28th. That's for patrons at the Rockstar Entrepreneur level and above. The next life-changing idea I want to tell you about is unschooling. And the book that really opened my eyes to this concept is a book called Instead of Education by John Holt. I found unschooling to be a really mind-blowing idea because I'm from a very academic background. I did well academically. I grew up with the idea that education was the best thing in life. I did an undergraduate degree, a master's degree, and a PhD. So I spent many years in education. And learning is still a core value for me. I still value attaining knowledge and wisdom. But what I came to understand from the book Instead of Education is that there is a huge difference between schooling and education. Or better said, there's a huge difference between schooling and learning. And that book opened my eyes to the idea that school is a prison for children. That's its core function, is a night release prison for kids. And that school teaches many more important psychological lessons, negative lessons, than it does impart wisdom and knowledge. Before I read that book, I never would have considered homeschooling or unschooling, because I always thought that homeschooling was just for kids with poor social skills or was just by parents who wanted to indoctrinate their kids in some kind of fundamentalist religion. That was the prejudice that I had about parents who did something outside the traditional school system. And since reading that book, it's totally opened my eyes to the potential for different approaches to learning. As you may know, if you've heard my episodes on this topic, this is an ongoing process, and my wife and I are still thinking about different options for our family. But still, the point is that this book is fascinating and a very well-written and coherent argument. So I think it's a very interesting read, regardless of what you ultimately choose to do with regards to your own kids' education. It can be a very interesting read just to reflect on your own experience of school as well. And as I said, the best book to get into that idea, I think, is Instead of Education by John Holt. If you would like to take part in the live stream that I will be doing about that idea, that's going to be on the 18th of August for patrons and bitbackers at the Rockstar Entrepreneur tier and above. The last life-changing idea that I want to tell you about in this episode is the idea of fail-safe investing. When I first got interested in investing, I noticed that there was this complete split in the investment world between sunny optimists and perma-bears, or people who think that everything is about to go terribly wrong. So the perma-bears, to explain their approach first, are people who constantly warn about the impending meltdown of the financial system, about how we're just moments away from hyperinflation, national debts are totally unsustainable, and the world is about to collapse. And then on the other hand, there are other people in the investment world who think that the perma-bears are just nuts and that there's nothing to worry about and that we should all just put our money in stocks for the long run and don't worry about anything. What I found frustrating about the situation is that I can see merit in both those arguments. I think it is possible that there could be terrible economic circumstances that could devastate savers and investors. Situations like hyperinflation or other types of economic crisis. But then again, I'm not anticipating these things necessarily happening anytime soon. They might never happen. They might not happen at all in my lifetime, but they are a risk. And so I wanted to find an approach that wasn't completely paranoid and didn't assume that the world is about to collapse for investors, but it still also took different risks into account. And that's the approach, I think, of fail-safe investing, of being prepared for any economic circumstance without pretending to know whether any of these particular economic circumstances are going to happen. I think this is a really important idea. And it comes from Harry Browne in his short book, Fail-Safe Investing. He also wrote about it in much longer books too, but that's the one that I recommend. And if you're interested in financial independence and you are thinking about money and investing, I think this is a great book to give you a no-nonsense guide to all of the different types of economic condition that you might face and what you might do as an individual investor to deal with potential risks that come from different economic conditions so that whatever happens, you'll be okay. I really like this approach too because it's not about a financial guru telling you what's going to happen. It's very much in the philosophy of passive investing and of doing things for yourself in a low-cost way, making your own decisions about your investments. But I think the ideas in fail-safe investing are really helpful for everyone who wants to save and invest for the future, and especially if you're interested in financial independence. And even if you don't adopt the recommendations that Harry Browne came up with, which is the permanent portfolio, which is a particular set of assets and rules about rebalancing, even if you don't adopt that, I think thinking about these potential different circumstances that you might face and thinking about what your strategy is going to be is extremely helpful. I have adopted the permanent portfolio, but I think you can take on the ideas of fail-safe investing and come up with your own alternative version of a portfolio that will do well in all sorts of economic conditions. And that's a testable idea too, because you can backtest your portfolio design against historic data to see whether or not it would cope well in different economic conditions. Anyway, I definitely recommend this. If you're interested in financial independence and those kinds of topics that I talk about on this podcast, and I'm going to be doing a live stream about that concept of fail-safe investing on September the 15th for patrons and bitbackers at the Rockstar Entrepreneur level and above. I've got many more life-changing ideas that I want to do live streams about. I want to talk about financial independence itself, the idea of peaceful parenting, life without politics, minimalism, lots and lots of other ideas that I would like to cover. But I wanted to share these 4 ideas with you as the first 4 live streams that I'll be doing, I'm also adding another new benefit for patrons and bitbackers who support me at the unjobber level, which is $5 a month. And that is that from now on, every month I will be providing a Q&A live stream where you can join me and other listeners to talk about any topic you would like. These Q&A live streams are the ones where listeners bring up their own questions and their own ideas, and we have a great time talking about all sorts of subjects. I never know in advance what we're going to talk about, and I always really enjoy those discussions. So from now on, if you support me at the unjobber level, which is $5 a month, you'll be able to take part in the Q&A live streams every month. If you would like to take part in this course about life-changing ideas, those live streams are open to supporters at the Rockstar Entrepreneur level, which is $10 a month. And even if you don't come to the live streams, I highly recommend these books. I think they're absolutely fascinating reading. Even if you don't adopt these ideas, they will make you think about how you live your life. And if you do adopt them, I think they can have a hugely positive impact on your life. That's the way I feel about the impact they've had on my life. So I hope you found that interesting. I would love to welcome you to a live stream if you'd like to become a patron and take part. You can find more information about that in the show notes or on my website, thevoluntarylife.com, or directly on my Patreon page, which is at patreon.com/thevoluntarylife.
Thank you for listening to The Voluntary Life. If you like this podcast, please show your support by becoming a patron of The Voluntary Life on Patreon. Your support will help to grow and improve the show, and you'll get access to a treasure trove of rewards, including bonus episodes. Visit thevoluntarylife.com to learn more.